from now, not even 20 years from now. We're really talking about what's in the lab today and coming to market in the next 2 to 5 years, 10 at the utmost. We're really talking about your life, your horizon if you're a CEO for the investments you're doing today. And it's extraordinary because a lot of the concepts you are hearing are things that we think about as far away, but they're happening right now. And they're going to change every aspect of our lives. They're going to change how we educate our kids, how we get our health care, how we run our companies, how we run our governments. I mean, and this is what the basic reason that this university was started. Right? It's the basic reason we're having these summits, these conversations, to give you a sense of the rate of change, right? We're living in a world where technology has got this tsunami of change coming. And I like to say you want to be riding on top, surfing on top of the tsunami, not being crushed by it. And your greatest advantage is education. So I'm going to be speaking about this concept of abundance and bold and moonshot thinking. And we'll dive into it. I'm going to start with a little bit of a conversation around abundance. And my goal here is to change your mindset about the world. To change the way you think about the world in a fundamental fashion. And then we'll talk about the technology that's changing it. So I had a chance to write this book that I'm very proud of. You met Neil Jacobstein earlier, who I credit with giving me the name of the book, Abundance. We were having a conversation one day and led to this name. And The Future is Better Than You Think, actually, my colleague Ray Kurzweil gave me the subtitle, so it was very much an SU product. And it came out of the work I was doing as the co-founder and executive chairman of SU and as the CEO and chairman of the X Prize. And I was seeing the world in an extraordinary fashion, the most amazing time ever to be alive. And I remember being in a cafe, hearing a young couple talking about the notion, is it morally right to bring a child into this world? And I was listening, and I was saying, what world are you seeing? I'm seeing a world that is extraordinary on almost every level. And the book goes on to talk about how the world is heading towards a time where we're going to meet the needs of every man, woman, and child on the planet. And as Celine mentioned, I happened to be in New York at the UN General Assembly and at the Clinton Global Initiative, and I was invited by President Clinton, who I'm a huge fan of his, to be his closing keynote for Clinton Global Initiative this year. And when he introduced me, he came out with a copy of my book, holding it up in the air, and I'm very proud as an author to have the President of the United States do that. And he had read it a number of times and had it all marked up. And he said to me, as he's introducing me, he said, Peter, why are you so optimistic about the future? Don't you watch the news? And I said, President Clinton, I try not to. And I said, I'm optimistic about the future for two reasons. One, I look at the data, and the second is I don't watch the news. And let me dive into that a second, because when I was here last year, there was a moment of fascination with a lot of the media, in which I said this to them directly. I said, today the news media is a drug pusher, and negative news is their drug. And every device that we have, our smartphone, our tablets, our radios, our newspapers, we are being fed negative news all the time. All the time. And you have to ask yourself the question, is that the way the world truly is? And I posit to you that it's not. And this first part of this conversation, I hope to sway your thinking. You see, it turns out that as we were evolving on the savannas of Africa hundreds of thousands and millions of years ago, if you missed a piece of good news back then, like some food over there, well, that's too bad. But if you missed a piece of negative news, your genes were out of the gene pool. You were dead meat, literally. And so we evolved an ancient piece of our temporal lobe called the amygdala that looks constantly and listens constantly for any negative news. And if it sees something negative, it puts you on high alert. And it's for this reason that we pay 10 times as much attention to negative news as we do positive news. And the news media knows this. And so open any newspaper, listen to any news broadcast, and you find 10 times more negative news than positive news. The old saying is, if it bleeds, it leads. So the question is that the way the world truly is? Or is this a manifestation of the fact that we have cell phone cameras recording every murder on the planet and delivering them directly to you in high definition over and over and over again in your living room? And so if you look at the actual data over the last 100 years, which I did, you learn the facts, which is over the last 100 years, the world has gotten extraordinarily better. The per capita income for every nation on this planet has more than tripled. The lifespan has more than doubled for us humans. The cost of food has dropped 13-fold. The cost of energy has dropped 20-fold. The cost of transportation 100-fold. Communications thousands-fold. This is the cover of The Economist last year, saying towards the end of poverty, we're taking billions of people out of extreme poverty and are taking billions more over the next 20 years. Truly is, for the population of humanity on the planet, the best time ever to be alive. When we romanticize the past of how it used to be, how wonderful it would be. It used to be that you'd die at 45 or 50 with cancer. And the majority of this audience wouldn't be here. But we forget these things. Steven Pinker at Harvard wrote a book called The Better Angels of Our Nature, in which he shows without question that we're living during the most peaceful time ever in human history. Your chance of dying a violent death are 1/500th of what they used to be. But you wouldn't know that watching CNN, the crisis news network, or the constantly negative news network, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, seriously, they could not pay me enough money to watch that news program. How you think matters. Who you hang out with matters. And when you allow the news media to be constantly pumping negative news into your mind, it changes the way you see the future. I mean, with all respect, the lives lost on a Malaysian airliner. Really, for 2 months, was there no other news? No positive news going on in the world. And so I want you to just take a moment and think about that for your own benefit, for your children's benefit, because the world has truly become an extraordinary place on almost every measure. And it isn't better politicians that got us there. It isn't that we've gotten smarter or genetically improved. Raymond hasn't played with us yet. It's the impact of technology over these last 100 years that have transformed this planet. And it's truly technology that has affected every aspect of our lives. And my thesis with abundance is that we're heading towards a world where we're going to be able to meet the needs of every man, woman, and child. Now, this is not about creating a life of luxury, right? It's not Ferrari and Louis Vuitton for everybody. That's not what I'm talking about here. But it is about bringing everyone on this planet, 7, 8, 9 billion people, with the same basic abilities, where everyone has access to water, food, shelter, energy, communications, healthcare, and education. This is something that is possible within the next 20 years and is happening, this democratization, and I'll speak about that in a little bit. You see, we are all born with the same thing. 7 days in a week, 24 hours in a day. It's how you use that time that differentiates you. If you're a mother of a child in Tanzania and your child is sick, then you're spending 2 days walking to the nearest village to find some kind of a healthcare worker. If you're a billionaire in Manhattan, you spend 10 seconds on a phone call and the world comes to you. And so 7/24 time and how we use time is how technology is changing. You heard Salim talking about that villager on a cell phone who decides to come in and sell his or her fish versus stay out and fishing. one of my realizations, Abundance did very well 2 years ago. My next book is called Bold. It's coming out it's coming out in February this year. And the realization that's very important is 1,000 years ago, if you wanted to change the world 1,000 years ago, or change your country 1,000 years ago, you had to be the king or the queen. That was it. You were the royalty. And even then, if you were the king and queen 1,000 years ago, all you had access to was your people, the physical labor of your army, or maybe the livestock they had. 100 years ago, 150 years ago, if you wanted to change your city and your country, you could be the industrialist and use your wealth and your power to do that. Today, if you want to change the world, change your city, solve a problem, any of us can do that. And this is what's so amazing. We're living during a time where an individual can have a bold vision of what they want to do. And as an individual, you have today power like governments and the largest corporations never had. You have access to the world's knowledge on Google. You have access to AI, to robotics, to 3D printing, to synthetic biology that you saw a few moments ago. You have access to, today, $15 billion in crowdfunding. By 2020, $100 billion in crowdfunding. You have access to a hyper-connected world of any expert you want is one click away. You want a quantum physicist, you want a geneticist. If you're passionate enough, and I've seen mothers and fathers do incredible things with no technology background when their child is sick. And this, for me, is the most amazing part of being alive today, is that as individuals, as entrepreneurs, we have the ability to take the problems of this world into our own hands and solve them. You guys with me? It's a very different world than we lived in before. You don't have to ask anyone's permission. You can go and solve a problem. And it's the basis for my next book called Bold, which is the notion that you can think big, you can create wealth, and you can impact the world. You know, one of the basic concepts behind Singularity University, and I'll launch into a conversation about some elements of exponential technologies, is that when Ray and I founded the university, it was under the basic premise that the world's biggest problems are the world's biggest business opportunities. It's a beautiful alignment. You want to become a billionaire? Help a billion people. And it's really the ethos of what we teach, right? We teach our graduate students that you as an individual have the ability, individual or an army of a small group, whatever it might be, you have the ability to impact the lives of 1 billion people in 10 years. That never existed before. And if you can, wouldn't you want to? Isn't that worthwhile of your life, of your efforts, of your energy?